Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through time, past the whir of cars and the glow of screens, into a world of smoke, silk, and suspicion. You open your eyes and suddenly the air smells of tallow candles and damp wool. The year is somewhere around 1558, and you're standing on a cobbled London street where everyone is watching everyone else's sleeves. Because in Tudor England, your outfit isn't just fashion. It's your autobiography, your social media feed, and your passport all stitched into one. You probably won't survive this century. Let's be honest, the plague will probably find you before your ruff goes out of style, but at least you'll look incredible when it does. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing our little night owls map grow brighter. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the threshold of a tailor's stall, the morning fog curling around your boots. Everywhere color splashes through the gray. Crimson hoods, saffron hose, a merchant's velvet cloak so rich it almost glows. You tug at your borrowed jerkin, coarse wool, scratchy at the neck, and try not to look too impressed. In Tudor England, fabrics speak first. The silk-clad lady striding past doesn't even glance at you. Her perfume arrives before she does, a waft of rosewater and power. Historians still argue whether Elizabethan society was the most fashion-obsessed of all Europe or simply the most paranoid about status. Either way, you feel it instantly. People don't dress for comfort here. They dress to survive a hierarchy sharp enough to cut thread. A boy dashes past, balancing a basket of ribbons. "Fresh from Antwerp," he shouts, as though the foreign origin alone adds shillings to the price. You watch him disappear into the crowd, and a tailor beside you mutters that the Flemish are ruining local trade. Same complaint, different century. Inside the stall, the tailor's hands never stop moving. Needles flash, shears hiss, and pins glint like tiny swords. He eyes you, guesses your rank, and gestures toward a modest roll of brown kersey cloth. That's your bracket, middle at best. The good stuff, silk, satin, velvet, isn't just expensive, it's illegal for someone of your class to wear. Welcome to the Tudor wardrobe, where fashion crimes are literally crimes. The tailor threads a needle, leans close, and whispers that last year's customer tried to sneak a strip of crimson trim onto his doublet. "Fined 2 shillings, he says with relish, and they made him cut it off in front of the guild. You nod solemnly, resolving not to get creative with your cuffs. Outside, the city yawns awake. Carters rattle past with barrels of ale, apprentices shout for space, and from a distant tower a bell tolls 8. You notice that even servants wear sleeves puffed and slashed, small imitations of noble style, like a wink at wealth. Imitation may be the sincerest form of flattery, but here it's also an act of ambition. As you wander, your senses overload. The stink of tanning vats, the sweetness of spiced bread, the weight of layers against your skin. You brush a wall, leaving a faint dust mark from your sleeve. That grime is part of everyone's palate here. Laundry days are few and soap is dear. Most folk freshen clothes by brushing, not washing. You'll soon understand why perfume becomes an accessory. At the market square, a woman sells ribbons and laces from a wooden tray. She holds up a piece of delicate Flemish bobbin lace so intricate it looks alive. "Worth its weight in silver," she boasts. She's right. Lace is new, exotic, and painfully fashionable. Only nobles can really afford it, but merchants' wives are learning creative loopholes. The woman leans in and confides that some wear lace hidden inside sleeves, so it doesn't count. You laugh. Apparently, loopholes were invented before lawyers. You move on, drawn by drummers announcing the arrival of a noble procession. Trumpets flare, the crowd parts, and here comes the spectacle. Riders draped in velvet, boots gleaming, the ladies' gowns trailing like painted sails. The sunlight turns their jewels into tiny suns. You catch your breath. You've never seen wealth so visible. And yet the most astonishing thing isn't the gold or the embroidery, it's how everyone else reacts. The crowd isn't just admiring, they're decoding. Each color, each fabric, each fur trim signals rank. That sapphire blue gown, reserved for the upper nobility. The crimson lining on that cloak, legal only for those earning more than £100 a year. Even the horse's harness tells you who's in favor at court this month. You realize this society is a living fashion algorithm. Every outfit communicates data, lineage, loyalty, aspiration. Dress wrong and you could offend a duke or draw suspicion from a magistrate. Dress too plainly and you vanish into poverty's fog. It's a delicate game and everyone's playing. Let's pause to imagine yourself dressing this morning. You'd start with a linen shirt, because everyone from king to cook wears linen next to the skin. Over that you'd pull on hose, then a doublet laced snug across your chest. Maybe you add a jerkin, maybe not. Every layer has a purpose: warmth, modesty, display. It's a bit like assembling social armor. Your hands smell faintly of lanolin from the wool, the fabric creaks when you move. You think of your modern pajamas and sigh. Nothing here breathes easily. But you can't complain. Real Tudors believed stiff, structured clothing reflected moral discipline. Loose garments, suspiciously idle. There's even a pamphlet warning that slack attire breedeth slack behavior. Imagine the comment section under that. You pass an elderly spinner seated by the street, twisting flax into thread with a drop spindle. Her fingers blur. The thread emerges thin and perfect. She smiles without stopping. She tells you she spun linen for 30 years, that her daughter weaves it and her son sells it at market. A family's fortune is only as strong as its warp, she says. You nod, unsure if it's a proverb or a warning. Historians still argue whether such cottage industries gave women real financial independence or merely more unpaid labor. Either way, the spinner owns her skill like royalty. For her, thread is currency, continuity, and comfort. By noon, the sun burns through the mist and colors sharpen. You find yourself outside a church, admiring the play of light on stained glass. Inside, a sermon echoes about vanity. The preacher scolds those who deck themselves in worldly raiment while his own sleeves puff impressively. You smile. Hypocrisy, it seems, is a timeless fabric. After service, townsfolk gather to gossip. A young apprentice complains that he can't afford proper shoes, so he stuffed straw inside. Another boasts of buying second-hand velvet from a dead noble's estate sale. You learn that hand-me-downs are a thriving business here. Clothing has a longer life than most marriages. A cloak can pass through 5 owners, each leaving a little history stitched in. You wander further and notice that even the poorest try to copy the fashions of the rich. Slashed sleeves made by cutting, not tailoring. Imitation gold thread made from brass wire. It's all about pretending, about momentarily feeling equal. You think of modern knockoffs and grin. Some things never change. Evening drifts in on the scent of wood smoke. You stop by a tavern where a minstrel sings about a lady who stitched her heart into her lover's cuff, literally. The crowd roars, mugs clink, and you realize fashion is more than fabric. It's myth, desire, identity. People here dream through their clothes. As you head toward your rented room, a low attic above a cooper's shop, you glimpse the Thames glowing copper in the sunset. You're tired, your feet ache, and your jerkin feels heavier than armor. But you understand something now. In Tudor England, appearance isn't vanity, it's survival. You unlatch the window and listen to the muffled city below. The hiss of a blacksmith's forge, a dog barking, laughter from the tavern. You imagine tomorrow, perhaps you'll visit the dyeworks or peek into a noble's wardrobe. For now, though, you let the night air cool your face. Somewhere a bell tolls curfew, and the city settles under its patchwork of wool and velvet dreams. You stretch out on your straw mattress, still wearing your linen shirt. Nobody here sleeps naked. Too risky, too cold. Your thoughts drift like loose thread through the day's tapestry. Colors, textures, hierarchies, ambitions. You can almost hear the whisper of fabric as centuries fold softly around you. The morning light seeps through your shuttered window like pale gold filtering through old linen. The city is already awake, and so are the sounds of a world stitched by class. You rise, stretch the stiffness from your shoulders, and reach for the jerkin you folded the night before. It's rough, itchy wool, the sort that clings to sweat and memory. A simple garment, but one that decides who will nod politely to you today and who will look straight through you. Out on the street, the marketplace hums like a hive. Every stall seems to shout in color and texture. Heaps of woolen cloth from Yorkshire, shimmering silks brought over from Italy, rolls of broadcloth so thick you could hide a fortune inside. You follow the smell of wet fabric to the cloth market, where merchants haggle in voices polished by profit. One of them, a stout man with a face like a roasted apple, waves you closer. Fine worsted, he calls. Durable, dyed deep as a bishop's robe. He slaps the roll with affection, the sound muffled and heavy. You reach to touch it, dense, slightly oily from the lanolin, and he watches your hand with the alertness of someone trained to judge wealth by touch alone. Too dear for an apprentice, he says, half kindly. The insult slides off you because as right. Here, the boundary between classes is woven, not written. Wool, that honest fabric of shepherds and citizens, belongs to the middling and the poor. Silk, on the other hand, belongs to heaven's chosen few. Historians still argue whether England's obsession with fabric was born from national pride or sheer envy of Italy's looms. Either way, it became a fever. Even the law books turned into fashion guides. A carriage clatters past its occupant, a woman visible for only a heartbeat, but that heartbeat is enough. You see the sleeve, damask silk the color of crushed pomegranate, threaded with gold. For an instant the whole street pauses, watching the way sunlight dances over her arm like a blessing. Then the carriage is gone, leaving behind the smell of perfume and awe. That's the great divide. She'll never know the weight of a wet wool cloak or the scratch of homespun linen. You, on the other hand, will probably never touch fabric that cost more than your month's wages. But it's not just about comfort. In Tudor England, fabric equals freedom. Silk means permission. Velvet means safety. Wool means work. A tailor once told you that sewing for nobles felt like building cages out of beauty. The garments were magnificent, yes, but their wearers were trapped by them. Every ribbon had a rule. Every hem had an expectation. Still, when you see those gowns float by, you can't help the small ache inside you. You wander toward the riverfront where the dyers keep their workshops. The Thames here smells of smoke, mud, and something sharp, vinegar maybe, used to fix color. A man kneels by a vat stirring liquid the color of midnight with a stick longer than your arm. Blue stains climb up his sleeves and across his knuckles, ghostly and permanent. "Woad," he grunts when you ask. "English blue, good for the cloth of honest folk." He spits into the river. Silk folk don't like the smell. You crouch to look closer. The liquid trembles, dark and luminous. The man lifts a dripping bundle of yarn, and for a moment it gleams green. Only when air touches it does it bloom into blue, a quiet miracle of chemistry. He notices your awe and chuckles. "That's how you know the color's true," he says. "It has to breathe before it becomes itself." You think about that long after you leave. The idea that color needs air, that identity comes alive only when exposed. It feels like a metaphor the Tudors would approve of. You stop at a stall where a woman sells remnants, scraps of velvet, torn sleeves, bits of lace too short for fashion but too precious for the fire. She tells you her customers come at dusk, whispering. They buy the pieces, she says, to line their collars or sew into cuffs. Hidden riches. She leans closer. "One lady had me stitch silk inside her gown where no one could see. Said she could feel the power of it against her skin." The thought lingers. Maybe fabric is like faith. You wear it for yourself, not for others. But this society disagrees. Here, the outside is everything. As you walk, you notice the way people measure each other. Eyes flick down, up, done. It's an unspoken language. A gentleman's cloak announces his income before he does. A servant's apron tells you her place faster than her surname. You realize there's almost no need for introductions in Tudor England. Your wardrobe handles that part. The division isn't just visual, it's tactile. Nobles live in softness. Feather-stuffed cushions, fur-lined cloaks, beds draped with embroidered canopies. Commoners live in texture, rough floors, coarse blankets, splintered benches. When you finally find an inn to rest your feet, you run your hand over the table's scarred wood and think, this is what equality would feel like, solid and shared. Over ale, you strike up a conversation with a cloth merchant who boasts that his wool has traveled farther than most sailors. We send it to Antwerp, he says, eyes gleaming. They turn it into wonders, then sell it back to us for thrice the price. He laughs into his cup. But we still buy it. Can't have the Queen in English wool, she'd melt. You grin, picturing Elizabeth I shimmering in imported silk, her courtiers sweating beside her in layered finery. Historians still argue whether her love of foreign fabrics was vanity or a deliberate statement that England, though island-bound, could command the world's luxuries. Either way, she made it law. Clothes as proof of loyalty, fabric as diplomacy. Later that day, the rain begins, a soft, soaking drizzle that blurs the edges of everything. People huddle under cloaks, but you can tell who can afford real warmth. The wealthy wear fine broadcloth, tightly woven and nearly waterproof. The poor, their wool drinks the rain like wine. You pass a beggar whose cloak clings like a wet sponge. He looks up at you, half smiling. Fine weather, he says, voice cracked, for the ducks and the duchesses. You give him a penny and your last dry handkerchief. By evening, the market has thinned. A group of apprentices laugh under an awning, flicking water at each other with their caps. One of them, spotting your damp state, offers you a place by their fire. You accept. Their hearth burns low, the air thick with the smell of wool steaming dry. They talk about their dreams, owning a shop, winning a noble patron, marrying someone who owns a decent loom. One boy, younger than the rest, holds up a piece of silk he stole from his master's scrap bin. It gleams even in the dim light. Feel that, he says, pressing it into your palm. It's weightless, almost unreal. One day, he whispers, I'll wear a shirt like this and they'll call me sir. The others laugh, but not cruelly. Everyone here understands the fantasy. You hand the silk back and notice your fingers trembling. Maybe it's the chill, or maybe it's the dawning realization that fabric in this age isn't just clothing. It's currency, identity, and rebellion all at once. When the fire dies down, you step outside again. The rain has stopped, and the sky glows faintly pink over the rooftops. Somewhere in a manor house, a noblewoman is removing her gown, her maid unfastening 100 tiny hooks. Somewhere else, a washerwoman wrings out a servant's shirt until her knuckles turn white. The same country, the same century, the same material world, divided only by thread. You walk toward the river once more, listening to the city's late-night sigh. Your wool jerkin still smells of smoke and dye, and you think how strange it is that one material defines your place in the universe. Yet you also sense that the boundary isn't absolute. After all, fabrics travel. They slip between hands and homes. Maybe tomorrow the scrap of silk from that apprentice will end up lining a merchant's purse or a beggar's pillow. The great divide may be stitched tightly, but no seam lasts forever. You close your eyes, letting the sound of distant looms blend with the river's slow rhythm. The city breathes around you, a patchwork of wealth and want, velvet and wool. And somewhere within that tapestry, you find yourself dreaming, not of riches exactly, but of something softer, the feel of a world where fabric no longer divides, only warms. The morning mist lies thin over the city, blurring chimneys into ghostly towers. You're standing in the yard of a dyer's workshop, boots sinking into damp straw. The air is thick with the scent of vinegar, smoke, and something faintly metallic color in its rawest form. Before you, wooden vats bubble and steam like cauldrons in a witch's dream. This is where the hues of Tudor England are born, one pungent breath at a time. A man with a scarred cheek lifts the lid off a vat and gestures for you to look. The liquid inside is black as a storm cloud, yet the cloth he pulls out gleams red, a deep, angry crimson that almost glows. Cochineal, he says, rolling the word in his mouth as if it tastes of money. Comes from beetles, tiny ones. From the New World, they say. You blink, beetles, he nods, grinning at your disgust. I crushed bugs for beauty, makes the richest red we've ever seen. He holds the cloth to the light, admiring the way it bleeds fire through the mist. Only nobles can afford this shade. The rest make do with madder root, cheaper, duller, fades fast. You realize, standing there, that in Tudor England even color has a class system. Historians still argue whether the obsession with color began as a spiritual impulse or a political one. Maybe both. In a world where literacy was rare, colors did the talking. Scarlet meant wealth and courage, green meant hope or youth, black meant dignity or despair, depending on who wore it. The palette of the kingdom was a coded language, one you're just beginning to learn. A young apprentice appears, sleeves rolled to the elbow, skin tinted blue from indigo. He grins at you, teeth startlingly white against the stain. "It never washes out," he says, showing his palms. "But I don't mind. Blue's honest, not like the fancy hues." He points toward the crimson cloth. "That one lies, pretends it's royal blood." You laugh softly. The dye house feels alive with contradictions, beauty made from decay, art born from toil. You wonder if the nobles in their silken halls know the stench their splendor comes from. When you leave the yard, your eyes seem to see the world differently. Every passerby becomes a painting of intention. A merchant struts by in saffron-dyed wool, announcing his success in color brighter than any coin. A nun glides past in black serge, her austerity as deliberate as his flamboyance. Even children, chasing hoops down the street, wear patches of meaning, one in faded blue, another in hopeful green. At a nearby stall, a woman sells ribbons dyed with onion skins and walnut husks, earthy tones for modest purses. She ties one around your wrist, laughing. "Keeps away envy," she says, or invites it, depending who's watching. Later, you wander into the courtyard of a grand townhouse where servants hang freshly washed garments from a line. The clothes sway in the breeze, an accidental rainbow of ranks. Deep purple gowns shimmer beside plain brown smocks. Golden hose flutter next to undyed linen shifts. You stand still, watching them like flags in a silent war. A steward emerges, giving you a quick, suspicious glance. "Move along," he says. "That purple's for my lord's lady." His tone softens, perhaps seeing your fascination. The queen herself forbids anyone under a viscount to wear it. Imagine the gall. Purple, you learn, is the most forbidden color of all. It's made from rare dyes so costly that entire estates could vanish into a single gown. Yet the restriction isn't only economic, it's symbolic. Purple is power, sanctioned by heaven. You touch your plain sleeve, wondering how color could be sacred enough to police. Historians still argue whether such laws truly curbed vanity or simply advertised it. After all, nothing makes a color more desirable than banning it. And yet, the system held for centuries, enforced by fines and social fury alike. You spend the afternoon near the Thames again, watching barges loaded with dye-stained cloth drift downriver. Workers sing to keep rhythm as they pole the boats. The melody is low, half prayer, half habit. You imagine each bolt of fabric traveling to some noble's wardrobe, transformed into gowns, doublets, dreams. The sun dips behind St. Paul's and the city softens into gold. You follow the glow to a small chapel where the choir rehearses. Inside, the stained glass burns with evening light, scarlet saints, azure skis, robes of impossible blue. You feel your breath catch. The colors seem alive, pulsing, as if the glass itself remembers every sunrise since it was fired. You take a seat in the cool pews and a priest nearby notices your awe. "Each hue speaks to the soul," he murmurs. "God painted his message in color first, words second." He nods toward the window depicting the Virgin Mary. "That blue, ultramarine, ground from lapis lazuli brought all the way from the east, worth more than gold." You glance again at the radiant glass. It hits you that for most Tudor people, color isn't mere decoration, it's theology. Heaven itself is imagined in pigment. Angels in gold, martyrs in red, salvation in blue. To wear certain colors is to borrow divine language for mortal display. As you step back into the night, London gleams under torchlight. Flickers of red cloaks, green sleeves, and yellow hoods dance in the dark. The city feels like a living tapestry, each person a thread of deliberate hue. But not everyone can afford to participate in this painted world. Down an alley, you glimpse the gray shadows of laborers, their clothes bleached by poverty and sun. Their colors are gone, faded to anonymity. Yet even here, one man has stitched a strip of bright cloth onto his hat, a rebellious dash of joy. He catches your eye and grins unashamed. "Bit o' life," he says, tapping the scrap. "The world's dull enough." You walk on, warmed by that small defiance. Maybe color, at its heart, is a kind of hope, the refusal to blend entirely into hardship. Later that night, in the common room of your lodging, you find a group of travelers arguing over fashion. A merchant insists green is lucky for trade. A scholar declares it the hue of foolish lovers. The innkeeper, polishing a mug, interjects that the queen favors white for virtue but secretly prefers silver for its shimmer under candlelight. You sip your ale, amused. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's famously pale gowns were symbolic of chastity or simply excellent branding. Either way, she turned paleness itself into power. Her court followed, faces powdered ghost-white, ruffs reflecting light like halos. The era became a theater of luminosity, where color and its absence played politics. When the conversation fades, you step outside. The moon has risen, bathing the city in soft silver. For the first time all day, everything seems the same shade. The poor man's cap and the lady's silk both gleam alike. You smile at the thought that even the moon ignores sumptuary laws. You lean against a post and watch the reflection ripple across puddles. The world feels gentler now, unified by light rather than divided by hue. But you know that when the sun returns, the rules will return with it, who may shine and who must fade. Still, you carry a secret. You've seen the dyes being made, the hands that stirred them, the stains that never wash off. You know that beneath every royal crimson lies the blue ink of a dyer's veins, that every golden gown begins in the mud of the Thames. The colors of Tudor life are not gifts of heaven, they're bargains struck on earth. As the city grows quiet, you walk back through narrow streets. Candlelight spills from windows, catching flashes of red and blue and green as if the walls themselves breathe. You think about what color you'd choose if there were no rules. Maybe the indigo of twilight, calm and infinite, or the earthy brown of wool, humble but honest. At your door, you pause and glance up at the sky, now fatting to black velvet. Somewhere above, the queen sleeps beneath embroidered canopies, and a dyer scrubs blue from his hands until dawn. Between them stretches the spectrum of the kingdom, vivid, fragile, and endlessly human. You whisper to yourself, barely a sound, every shade has a story. Then you close your eyes, letting the darkness settle like the gentlest of fabrics around you. You wake to the soft groan of timber and the faint rustle of thatched roofs in the wind. The smell of smoke and baking bread drifts through the half-open shutters. Morning again in Tudor England, where walls breathe, floors creak, and privacy is something reserved for the dead. You sit up in your narrow bed, brushing away a strand of straw that somehow found its way into your hair. The blanket smells faintly of lanolin, unwashed wool, the perfume of common life. The bed is small, its rope stretched tight beneath the mattress. You remember the phrase, "sleep tight." This is where it was born. When those ropes sag, you quite literally fall through your dreams. You step barefoot onto the floorboards, uneven, warm from the fire below. The cottage around you feels both sturdy and improvised, as if built by a family who trusted timber more than permanence. The beams are darkened by centuries of smoke. The plaster between them glows faintly white, patched and repatched. You can hear chickens somewhere under the floorboards, a reminder that the Tudor home was part farmhouse, part fortress, part social theater. Outside, the street stirs to life. A milkmaid calls out, a peddler shouts his wares, the distant toll of church bells rolls over the rooftops. You duck your head out the low doorframe and immediately bump it, again. Tudor people were shorter, yes, but not that short. They simply built ceilings low to keep the heat trapped. Smart, really, if you don't mind a few bruised foreheads. Your neighbor, Master Garth the carpenter, waves his saw like a greeting. "Mornin', traveler. Roof held through the rain, I see." You grin barely. He laughs, missing a tooth. That's Tudor craftsmanship. It leaks just slow enough for pride to survive. His joke hides a truth. Building in this age is less about design and more about endurance. Every house, from manor to hovel, grows like a living thing, added to, patched up, leaned against the future. Historians still argue whether this organic style was born from necessity or a kind of humble artistry. Either way, there's beauty in its crookedness. You walk down the lane past a row of timber-framed homes, each with its own personality, gables jutting like eyebrows, windows winking unevenly. Their colors surprise you, not the dull brown you expect, but ochres, greens, even soft reds. Limewash mixed with natural pigments gave these buildings life. You run your hand along one wall. The surface feels cool, like old skin. At the corner stands a baker's shop, its door propped open to let the yeast-sweet air escape. Inside, the oven roars, built right into the wall, brick, ash, and fire fused into daily necessity. You buy a small loaf, still hot, and bite into its dense heart. There's no sugar here, just salt, grain, and labor. It tastes honest. The baker grins at your reaction. "Best eaten warm," he says. "Everything's better warm in this country." You step outside again, bread in hand, and notice the way people move through their world. Women draw water from the communal well, gossiping as they fill their buckets. Men mend fences, sharpen tools, sweep the mud from doorsteps. The street is both workplace and living room. Privacy, you realize, is a luxury of the future. Here, life is meant to be witnessed. You follow the sound of hammering to a construction site, a new tavern being built. The master mason is shouting at his apprentices, who scramble like sparrows on the scaffolding. He notices you watching and calls down, "Fine work, eh? Won't fall till my grandchildren's bones do." He's shaping stone with a precision that borders on prayer. Each block must fit perfectly, not just for beauty, but because mortar is scarce and costly. You ask how he decides the size of each piece. He shrugs. "The stones tell me." A poetic answer, and probably true. The Tudor mason works by instinct, guided by angles, rhythm, and a lifetime of touch. Farther down the street, a wealthy merchant's townhouse rises like an island of refinement. Unlike the cottages, this one boasts glass windows, tiny panes held together by lead strips. They shimmer like jewels in the sunlight, distorting the view inside. You lean closer and catch a glimpse of tapestry walls and a gleaming oak table. The door creaks open, and a servant eyes you warily. "Stand back, if you please. The lady dislikes dust near her gowns." Glass, you learn, is one of Tudor England's proudest luxuries. Imported, fragile, and absurdly expensive, it marks the divide between those who live in transparency and those who live in drafts. The merchant himself appears, dressed in fur despite the mild day, and greets you with a nod. Fine craftsmanship, don't you think? Each pane hand-blown. You nod politely, though you're more impressed by the sheer effort of keeping all those surfaces clean in a smoky city. Historians still argue whether we live for comfort or display, the merchant muses. I say, why not both? He chuckles and retreats inside, his reflection splintering in the uneven glass. You walk on, following the street until it widens into a small square. At its center stands a market cross, a stone pillar carved with saints and scrolls, weathered smooth by centuries of touch. Around it bustle vendors selling everything from wool and candles to ribbons and eels. The architecture here grows denser, taller, leaning together like gossiping ants. Wooden upper floors jut over the street, so close you could shake hands between windows. A child tugs your sleeve and points upward. "Look, mister, it's falling." You follow his gaze. The house indeed seems to tilt alarmingly, but the boy's mother laughs. "Been that way 50 years. It leans, but it loves us." You grin. These buildings survive because they move, expanding, shrinking, bending with the seasons. It's a kind of architectural forgiveness. Behind the market, you discover a row of new houses rising under royal ordinance, the Tudor government's latest obsession: orderly streets, straight lines, uniform facades, brick instead of timber. Fire safety, a foreman explains. His Majesty's tired of cities burning down every decade. He gestures to the neat red walls. Bricks the future, no more kindling for houses. You touch the surface. It feels smooth, efficient, almost too precise. You can't help missing the whimsy of crooked beams. Progress always demands a little personality as payment. By afternoon, you've wandered beyond the town walls into the open countryside. The fields spread golden under a high, pale sky. Here, architecture softens into landscape, cottages huddled in valleys, barns crouching beside orchards. You stop at a wayside church, its spire pointing stubbornly toward heaven. The stone is pitted and lichen-covered, but inside it glows with warmth. Wooden pews shine from generations of hands, and the ceiling beams meet like ribs protecting a heart. You sit for a while, letting the silence wrap around you. In this stillness, you realize something. Tudor England's greatest building material isn't stone or timber, it's continuity. Every structure, from shambles to cathedral, carries the fingerprints of those before. Nothing is entirely new. Everything is built upon memory. A soft rustle interrupts your thoughts. The vicar's wife is sweeping the aisle, her broom bristling against the flagstones. She smiles. You look thoughtful, stranger. Are you praying or resting? Both, perhaps, you say. She chuckles. Then you understand the purpose of architecture, to shelter both body and soul. Outside again, dusk settles. The air smells of peat smoke and apple skins. As you return toward the city, the skyline glows, hundreds of chimneys exhaling together. You pass through the gates and notice how the buildings seem to close ranks around you, protective and claustrophobic all at once. London feels alive, its timbers creaking like bones settling for the night. At your inn, you climb the narrow stairs to your room. The walls are rough plaster, the window tiny but glowing faintly with moonlight. You lie back on the bed, watching the shadows flicker from the hearth. The beams above your head look like black rivers flowing into darkness. You wonder if, centuries from now, someone will stand where you lie and marvel at these same crooked lines. The fire crackles. Outside, the wind hums through the eaves, the Tudor lullaby. You close your eyes and drift, imagining every house, cottage, and castle whispering its story into the night. For all their imperfections, these buildings endure, warm, bent, alive, just like the people who made them. The next morning dawns with a thin drizzle, the kind that turns the world soft around the edges. You pull your cloak tighter and follow the muddy road toward the marketplace, where the true pulse of Tudor life beats loudest. Yesterday was about walls and roofs. Today, it's about what fills them. Food, laughter, superstition, and the invisible choreography that keeps this kingdom breathing. The market square glimmers with puddles and noise. You hear the shouts first, hawkers calling over one another like an orchestra of ambition. Fresh fish from the Thames, apples from Kent, laces for your lady's sleeves. The air smells of rain, hay, and humanity. Every sound feels alive, thick with barter and banter. You weave between stalls, brushing damp cloth, baskets of herbs, and the occasional squawking chicken. There's a rhythm to it all, a living heartbeat of trade. A fishmonger grins as you pass. Care for an eel, good sir, still wriggling. He holds one up, its silver body twisting in protest. You decline politely, and he laughs. Aye, too early for eel. A few paces on, a woman selling ribbons holds out a length of blue silk. For luck, she says. Tie it round your wrist and no spirit will follow you home. Her tone makes it impossible to tell if she's teasing or warning. In Tudor England, superstition hides in every purchase. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were born of fear or comfort. Perhaps both. You buy the ribbon not because you believe her, but because the day feels like it could use a little luck. You pass a baker's cart loaded with pies that smell of heaven and mystery. One is marked venison, another goose, and a third, worryingly, assorted. You hesitate. The baker notices and smirks. "Meat's meat," he says. "What the gentry leave behind, the rest of us don't waste." He isn't wrong. In a world where winter is a test, thrift becomes its own virtue. You buy an apple tart instead, safe, fragrant, and slightly burnt. The crust cracks beneath your teeth, and you hum in quiet satisfaction. Food here isn't fancy, but it's honest. Even the poorest fare has warmth in it if you eat slowly enough. Past the market, the road opens into a small green where children chase one another around a maypole, their laughter cutting through the gray air. A fiddler plays nearby, tapping his foot in time. "Harvest fair," someone shouts. "Come join, stranger." You hesitate, but why not? You've wandered this far through Tudor life. What's a little dancing among strangers? A woman in a red bodice grabs your hand before you can answer and pulls you into the circle. The music swells, the ribbons spin, and for a dizzy minute the whole world becomes rhythm and laughter. Mud splashes your boots and your lungs ache from joy. The woman grins, cheeks flushed. You move well for someone from nowhere. You laugh breathlessly, and you dance like someone with secrets. She winks, don't we all? The fiddler ends the tune and the crowd claps, scattering like sparrows. You thank her, still catching your breath, and she says, "If you're wandering, visit the smithy on Westgate. They say he forges luck." Then she disappears into the drizzle, leaving only the echo of her laughter. Curiosity wins. You find the smithy an hour later, a low, blackened building pulsing with the sound of hammer on iron. The heat hits you like a wall. Inside, sparks leap into the smoky air, and the smith himself looks like he's been carved from the same metal he shapes. He glances up, eyes gleaming. "Lost your way or seeking something made?" "Luck," you say, half joking. He grins, wiping soot from his forehead. "Then you've found the right fool. Everyone wants luck, few can carry it." He reaches into a box and pulls out a small iron charm shaped like a horseshoe. "Hang it above your door," he says. "It keeps away bad dreams and worse taxes." You thank him, though you suspect luck costs more than iron. As you leave, you hear him murmur behind you, "Mind the road, it remembers every foot that's fallen." Outside, the rain has turned steady, soaking through your cloak. The world gleams, wet cobblestones reflecting crooked houses, puddles swallowing the sky. You duck into the nearest inn, its sign swinging overhead, the Swan and Crown. Inside, it's warmth incarnate. Firelight dances on pewter mugs and damp faces. The smell of ale and wood smoke fills the air. You find a corner near the hearth and thaw beside a group of locals swapping stories. They eye you with mild curiosity, then one of them, a bearded fellow in a leather jerkin, raises his mug. "Traveler, then, come far." "Far enough," you say. He nods knowingly. "Then you'll want to hear about the ghost of Fenton Bridge. Stole a bishop's purse, they say, and now it rattles chains every full moon." You smile, sipping ale. You believe it. He shrugs. "Doesn't matter," makes the night shorter. And that, you realize, might be the best explanation for Tudor folklore ever uttered. Ghosts, witches, omens, they're not about belief. They're about surviving long nights in a dangerous world. The innkeeper joins in, setting down a jug of cider. "Historians still argue whether our age is dark or golden," he says, polishing a mug. "But I tell you this, a man who can laugh through hunger and ghosts alike lives in more light than most kings." You raise your mug in agreement. Around you, the talk drifts from hauntings to harvests, from the Queen's new laws to the price of candles. Every voice carries a note of weary humor, a refusal to surrender to gloom. The Tudor world may be hard, but its people glow with the strange joy of those who expect little and treasure everything. Later, when the fire burns low, you step outside again. The rain has stopped. The street shines like a mirror and the air smells clean, almost new. Somewhere nearby, church bells mark the evening, slow, measured, comforting. You pass a beggar wrapped in rags, sitting beneath an archway. He looks up as you near. "Spare a penny," he croaks. You give him a crust of your tart instead. He nods, chewing slowly, then mutters, "God keep you from the color gray." You pause. What do you mean? He points toward the misty horizon. Grays when the world forgets you, brights when it still remembers. You walk on, unsettled and moved in equal measure. Maybe that's what color means here, in more ways than one, a sign that you're seen. When you reach your lodging, the door creaks as though sighing in relief. Inside, you hang the iron charm above your bed. It catches the last flicker of candlelight, glowing faintly. You close your eyes, and the sounds of the market, the music, the laughter all fade into a single, slow heartbeat. Somewhere, you think, the red-bodiced dancer is still laughing in the rain. Somewhere, the smith's forge still burns, melting metal and luck into one. And you drift into dreams tinted with the smoke and color of Tudor life, where superstition hums softly like a lullaby. The morning dawns golden and cold, sunlight spilling like melted brass over crooked rooftops and mystic alleys. You wake to the clatter of wheels and hooves outside your window. London's alive again, and today its heartbeat feels faster, sharper. There's a different rhythm in the air, one of ambition. The lace of time, it turns out, isn't just made of color and cloth, but of class, stitched together by money and luck. You pull on your cloak, step into the street, and immediately catch sight of a group of apprentices hauling bales of cloth toward a merchant's hall. They grunt under the weight, laughing through their exhaustion. One of them, a red-haired boy with freckles, catches your eye. "Careful, stranger," he says. "If you stand still too long, someone will put you to work." You grin, moving aside as they pass. The fabric they carry gleams velvet and damask, embroidered and perfumed. You can almost smell the ambition woven into it. These bolts of cloth are more than trade goods, they're social ladders. A shopkeeper arranging ribbons nearby shakes his head. All this for one noble's new wardrobe. They'll wear it twice, then order more. He sighs. I mend the gowns after they're thrown out, patching dreams for pennies. His tone isn't bitter, more resigned, like someone long used to mending what others break. Historians still argue whether Tudor class divisions were as rigid as they appear or whether mobility was, in its own way, possible. You decide it's both true and false at once. In this world, a person might climb, but only if someone above them falls. You make your way to the Guildhall, drawn by the sound of a bell. Inside, the air hums with the low murmur of commerce. Merchants in fur-trimmed coats discuss prices. Clerks scratch figures into ledgers. The hall itself is a cathedral to trade, high-beamed, smoke-darkened, heavy with the scent of parchment and ambition. Every inch of it speaks to order and hierarchy. A steward approaches, his quill tucked behind one ear. "Visitors?" he asks. "Just observing," you reply. He smiles faintly. "Then observe this, the real power of London isn't in the court but here." He gestures toward a group of men deep in conversation. The guildmasters, bakers, masons, dyers, goldsmiths. They keep the kingdom running while the nobles keep it shining. You linger, listening as deals are struck. 100 yards of silk promised to a lady-in-waiting, a cartload of nails to the builders of a new chapel. Each voice is a thread, and together they weave a tapestry of quiet empire. You realize something. In Tudor England, wealth isn't just measured in coin, it's measured in control, in who decides what color someone else can afford to wear. Outside again, the air feels fresher, freer. You follow the river where bargemen are unloading crates from the continent, wine from France, spices from Venice, and strange bolts of fabric from the east. You pause as one crate cracks open to reveal shimmering silk, pale as moonlight. The dockmaster frowns. "Forbidden for commoners," he says, almost reverently. "That'll be bound for a lady's shoulder or a bishop's sleeve." You touch the silk and it slips through your fingers like water. The dockmaster shakes his head. "You and me will never wear that, but someone's daughter might if she marries well enough." That thought lingers as you climb the hill toward the merchant quarter. The streets here are cleaner, the doors painted. You stop before a tailor's shop whose sign bears a gilded needle. Inside, the walls are draped in fabrics that almost hum with luxury. The tailor himself, tall and precise, greets you with a knowing look. "You're not here to buy," he says. "You're here to imagine." He's right, of course. He leads you to a display of doublets, each one a story of ambition stitched in gold thread. This one, he says, brushing his hand over a crimson velvet, belongs to a lord who wants to seem fearless. This green silk for a young courtier seeking favor. That gray one there, a widow's mourning, but expensive enough to prove her sorrows well-funded. You can't help but laugh softly. So every garment's a performance. He nods. Isn't everything? The queen herself wears white not for purity but power. The absence of color becomes a crown. He straightens a cuff with near-religious care. Historians still argue whether she invented that illusion or simply perfected it. He pauses, then glances at your travel-stained cloak. You're lucky, he says quietly. Freedom wears plain clothes. You leave the shop thoughtful, stepping back into sunlight that glitters on puddles like gold coins. For a moment, you imagine stripping away the layers of fashion, the masks of color and cloth. What would remain? A world divided not by fabric, but by fear, of hunger, of judgment, of being unseen. You wander into a narrow street where reality feels closer to the ground. Here, women hang laundry from lines that crisscross above the alley, and children play among barrels. The smell of yeast and wood smoke mixes with laughter. This is another kind of beauty, worn, patched, alive. A washerwoman, arms deep in a wooden tub, looks up at you. Don't stare, she says, smiling without malice. We make the kingdom's beauty smell human again. She wrings out a shirt, muscles straining. Every stain tells a story, you know. Ink, wine, blood, all part of living. You ask if the stains ever truly wash out. Never, she says, but we keep trying. That's what matters. You linger, helping her hang the clean linen on the line. The wet fabric gleams white in the afternoon sun, almost holy in its ordinariness. You realize you've been looking at class through the wrong end of the telescope. Here, in the rhythm of washing, mending, and enduring, there's a kind of nobility untouched by decree or coin. By evening, you find yourself back at the docks, where the water glows orange in the setting sun. Workers sit along the wharf, eating bread and smoked fish, trading jokes in the fading light. You sit among them, the smell of salt and tar thick in your nose. One of them, broad-shouldered, scarred, breaks his bread in half and offers you a piece. You don't look like a laborer, he says, but you eat like one. You smile, taking it, and you talk like a philosopher. He chuckles. A hungry one, maybe. But tell me, stranger up at court, do they laugh as much as we do down here? You think of the tailor's silence, the merchant's pride, the nobles wrapped in laws of color and thread. No, you say softly, they laugh less. He grins, teeth flashing. Then let them keep their silks, I'll keep my laughter. As darkness settles, lanterns bloom along the riverbank, their reflections trembling in the black water. You stand, stretching, feeling the ache of the day in your bones. The world here feels real, imperfect, smoky, and beautifully human. You head back toward your lodging, the iron charm above your door catching a sliver of starlight. You lie down, the scent of river air still clinging to your hair, and think about the red-haired apprentice, the washerwoman, the laughing laborer. In a world obsessed with class, maybe true worth isn't worn, it's lived. Your last thought before sleep is simple, soft, and sure. Every thread, no matter how coarse, still shines when the firelight finds it. Morning comes later in autumn, the sky still half asleep when the first hammer strikes. The sound rolls through the air, sharp, metallic, echoing off half-built walls and soot-streaked towers. You follow it like a pilgrim follows bells, tracing the rhythm through narrow Tudor lanes until you reach the source, a construction yard alive with noise, dust, and devotion. They are building a hall, vast, timber-boned, ambitious. Men clamber up wooden scaffolds, their breath white in the chill. The scent of oak and mortar mingles with that of sweat and smoke. You pause, watching as a mason taps at a block of limestone with infinite care, coaxing out the shape hidden within. A foreman shouts from above, "Mind the beam." And the world tilts for a moment as two men lift a massive oak trunk into place, its ends smoothed and carved with initials. You ask the mason how long it will take. He smiles without looking up. A haul like this, 10 years, maybe 12. The stone got to settle before you roof it or she'll crack with the frost. She. He nods. Every building's a woman. She needs patience, beauty, and strength. Rush her and she'll punish you. You remember that line. It stays with you all day. If Tudor clothing was its skin and color its face, then its buildings were the bones, everything rested on them. Every town, castle, abbey, and manor had its own character, shaped by materials and money, faith and fear. You begin to see how the world was held together by timber and stone, each one whispering its own quiet history. In the countryside, houses tilt at strange angles, beams blackened by smoke and centuries. Thatch roofs curve like sleeping animals, the air around them smelling faintly of wet straw. Inside, the floors creak in protest but hold steady, a reminder that survival here isn't about perfection but persistence. In towns, the story changes. There, brick is the mark of wealth. It gleams red in the sunlight, arranged in precise patterns that announce pride and permanence. The bricklayers talk of fire as though it were a collaborator. Clay, nothing until it's burned, one says. You've got to hurt it to make it last. Later that week, you find yourself drawn to the ruins of an abbey, its walls cracked, its roof long since claimed by ivy and rain. It was abandoned, someone tells you, after Henry VII's men came through, tearing down the monasteries that had once been the heart of faith and charity. Inside, the silence is almost holy. Birds nest in the rafters, and light falls in shafts through arched windows where glass once shimmered. You trace the edge of a stone basin worn smooth by centuries of hands. It feels warm, as if memory itself has a temperature. You think of the men who built this place, not nobles or kings, but craftsmen. They carved devotion into every groove and corner, believing their work would outlive them. In a way, it did. The abbey may be broken, but its presence remains a ghost made of architecture. A shepherd passes with his flock, tipping his hat. We use it for shelter now, he says, almost apologetic. The sheep don't mind the echoes. You smile. Maybe that's what it was always meant for, to keep something alive. Back in the city, you discover another kind of architecture, not built for beauty, but for survival. You follow the sound of rushing water to the great conduits that carry the city's lifeblood. London's water flows through wooden pipes, through wells and fountains that have quenched generations of thirst. At the same time, smoke fills the air, every chimney breathing like a beast. Tudor London is a city that burns to live. Fires heat homes, bake bread, boil dye, forge metal. The smell of wood smoke becomes its perfume. But fire is also the city's greatest fear. You pass a street where charred timbers still stand like ribs after a recent blaze. A woman sweeps ash from her doorstep, her face calm. It happens, she says. We build again. And she does already. A new frame rises where the old one fell. You realize that every Tudor building carries its opposite within it: creation and destruction, permanence and decay. Even the grandest manor is a negotiation with time. A few days later, your wanderings take you beyond the smoke to Hampton Court, a palace so vast it feels like a city unto itself. Red brick towers rise like sentinels, windows glittering with heraldic glass. You walk through the great hall, where carved angels gaze down from hammerbeam rafters, wings outstretched in eternal applause. Here, architecture isn't humble, it's theatrical. Every corridor, every arch, every doorway declares, "Look how mighty I am." The courtiers glide through like actors on a stage, the tapestries around them murmuring with scenes of triumph and divine favor. A steward notices your fascination. You can tell who built what, he says, by how high the ceilings are. You glance up, so height equals power. He smiles, always. He leads you to the kitchens, vast as a cathedral where fires roar under iron spits heavy with meat. The scent is dizzying: roasted beef, dripping fat, fresh bread. Dozens of cooks move like clockwork, feeding the court's appetite for both food and spectacle. You understand then, architecture is politics in stone. A hall this grand doesn't just house power, it performs it. When you leave the palace and head north again, you begin to notice the bridges, humble marvels that hold entire worlds together. The Great Bridge across the Thames is a city in itself, crowded with shops, houses, and chapels perched precariously above the water. You walk its length, the river roaring below, the smell of tallow and bread thick in the air. Farther along the road, you stop at an inn, its sign swinging in the wind. Inside, travelers huddle around the fire: merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, thieves. The walls are thick with smoke, and the beams above your head are carved with initials from long-gone visitors. The innkeeper tells you the building, over 100 years old, built from the bones of ships, he says proudly, thumping one of the beams. Oak that's crossed the sea and come home again. The thought is comforting, that even timber, once part of the ocean's restlessness, can find peace in sheltering the weary. One evening, a carpenter invites you into his home on the edge of the village. Inside, everything gleams with handwork: carved chests, latticed windows, even the chairs seem alive with care. He gestures toward the ceiling where smoke curls through the thatch. Every joint, every peg, every grain, he says. I know it. A house's soul isn't in its walls. It's in the people who fix it when it breaks. You ask him if the wood ever talks back. He laughs softly. Always. Oak complains, pine sighs, and elm, she creaks like she's telling you secrets. But they're all loyal if you treat them right. You stay until the fire burns low. The carpenter's wife hums as she mends a torn sleeve, her needle catching the light. For the first time, you feel the warmth not of fire, but of belonging, the kind that only walls built by love can hold. Later that night, as you walk home under a sky washed silver by moonlight, you think about all the buildings you've seen: the abbey, the palace, the inn, the hovel. Each one a sentence in England's story, each one breathing in its own rhythm. You pass through the churchyard, where the stones tilt like weary soldiers. You pause, brushing moss from one of them. The engraving has worn away, but the shape endures. The dead, it seems, are the final architects, their memory shaping the land even after their names fade. You reach your room, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and lime wash. Outside, the city quiets. Inside, the beams above your bed creak as the night settles. For a long while, you listen to the faint crackle of the fire, the heartbeat of a house that's older than you'll ever be. And then, as sleep claims you, it feels as though the walls lean closer, whispering their gratitude. They remember every hand that built them, every life they've sheltered, every dream they've contained. You drift off, wrapped in the sound of stone and smoke, the steady music of Tudor England breathing through time. You wake to the smell of bread, rich, earthy, alive. Somewhere nearby, someone has just pulled loaves from an oven, their crusts cracking in the cool morning air. Hunger hums in your stomach, but this isn't just about eating. In Tudor England, food is performance, identity, and sometimes even sin. You walk toward the village square, where the market hums like a hive. The air is full of voices and scents: onions, smoke, yeast, salted fish. A boy sells apples polished on his sleeve. A woman ladles pottage from a steaming pot, and somewhere a goose protests its fate. The rhythm of trade feels timeless. Even the cries of 2 for a penny seem rehearsed by generations. A baker calls out, flour dusting his hair like snow. Fancy a manchet, he asks, holding up a small, perfect loaf, fine white bread made only for the wealthy. You reach for one, but he laughs gently. Ah, you're no lord, this one's for them. He nods toward a man in velvet doublet and gold-threaded sleeves. You friend, get the maslin, honest brown, tastes better anyway. You take it, feeling the heat through your hands. He's right. It tastes of earth and work and quiet pride. Historians still argue whether Tudor diets were truly rich or surprisingly plain. Some accounts rave about feasts of swan and venison. Others describe months of salted fish and cabbage. The truth, as you chew, seems to be somewhere between a balance of scarcity and showmanship, hunger and glory. At the manor house, it's another story entirely. The kitchens, there are orchestras of heat and sound. Pots clang, spits turn, and boys run barefoot through the smoke carrying trays of meat. You slip inside, unnoticed, through the side door, into a world ruled by rhythm and aroma. A cook waves a ladle like a general's baton. "Spices," she barks, and someone brings a box the size of a Bible. Inside, saffron, cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, and treasures from distant lands, precious as gold. She tips a pinch of saffron into the pot, and the broth blooms into sunlight. It strikes you that color, once again, is power. Even at the table, yellow means luxury, red means heat, green means fresh wealth. The Tudors eat their class as much as they wear it. The cook notices you watching. "Never waste the color," she says. "If it looks dull, they'll think it tastes poor, and if it tastes poor, they'll blame me." You nod, pretending you belong, and edge closer to a table where pastries wait to be filled. Each one is a small miracle swan sculpted in dough, pies shaped like castles. You lift one lid to peek inside and jump back when a small bird flutters out, wings dusted with flour. The cook bursts out laughing. "Ah, the surprise pie for the banquet tonight. The lords love it, live birds in the crust. They squeal with delight, poor fools," she smirks. And then, of course, the birds make a mess all over their velvet sleeves. Serves them right. You can't help but grin. Some things, you realize, never change. The powerful love their tricks, and the workers love watching them fall for them. Later, you follow the kitchen boys to the great hall, where preparations for the feast unfold. The long table stretches beneath a canopy of tapestries and candlelight. You run your hand along the polished oak, feeling grooves from centuries of elbows and spilled wine. At the head sits the salt cellar, a gleaming tower of silver and crystal. To sit above the salt is to matter, below it to serve. The very furniture enforces hierarchy. As you watch, servants lay trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread that will serve as plates. They'll soak up gravy and grease, then be tossed to the poor waiting at the gate. Nothing goes to waste except dignity. A man beside you whispers, "Feast days and fast days, that's the rhythm. 40 days without meat, then a week of gluttony." He shrugs. "We eat as the church commands." You look around. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Half the room is already sneaking bites of forbidden meat, pretending piety with their mouths full. "Historians still argue," your companion says, "whether people believed in fasting or just feared being caught." He wipes his hands on his doublet. "I'd say both." The trumpets sound and the feast begins. You watch as platters march out in order of splendor: roasted boar, gilded peacock, sugared fruit, marzipan sculptures of saints. The smell alone is intoxicating. The wine glows red like stained glass. The laughter grows louder with every toast. A jester tumbles near the fire, juggling apples until one falls into the flames. The guests roar with laughter. The host raises a cup, gold, of course, and shouts, "To the king's stomach." Everyone drinks. You drink too, though you're not sure what you're celebrating. By the third course, you can barely think. The noise, the smell, the brightness, it's too much. You slip outside into the night, where the air is cool and still. The stars look pale after the candlelight, and your ears ring from the echo of merriment. Down by the kitchen door, the real feast happens. Servants share leftovers, a bone, a crust, a handful of raisins. Someone pours a drop of ale into your cup. "To the night shift," he says. You clink, and it's better than any golden goblet. You sit with them for a while, trading stories. A scullion tells you about the Lord's secret, how he hides forbidden French cheese in a chest under his bed. Another laughs and swears that once, a noble lady fainted because her sleeve caught on fire while reaching for a candle. "Did she burn?" you ask. "No," the scullion says, chuckling, "just her pride." You stay until the laughter fades into yawns. The kitchen boys curl up by the dying embers, the night full of soft breathing and smoke. You find a corner and wrap yourself in your cloak, the warmth of roasted meat still clinging to your hair. You think about how every meal tells a story of power, faith, hunger, and hope. In this world, food is never just food. It's art, rebellion, survival. And as sleep tugs at you, you imagine the taste of tomorrow's bread baked from the same earth, touched by the same hands, carrying forward the same quiet dream of comfort. You wake to the sound of footsteps on wet cobblestone, quick, measured, and echoing faintly between timbered walls. The air smells of rain and soot, but also of something metallic, sharp, and clean, the scent of trade. Today, the streets hum not with laughter but with purpose. You step outside, pulling your cloak tighter, and join the flow. Merchants, apprentices, washerwomen, and scholars, all moving through the same maze of Tudor commerce. Here, money doesn't just buy things, it buys freedom, and for some, that freedom smells sweeter than any rose in the Queen's garden. A bell clangs from the marketplace ahead. You follow it, the cobbles slick under your boots. The stalls rise like a patchwork of color, red apples, blue-dyed cloth, yellow cheese wheels, copper pots gleaming like captured sunlight. Somewhere a pig squeals, somewhere else someone laughs too loudly. A cloth merchant waves you over. His hands are stained indigo, his sleeves frayed with the evidence of his craft. Fine broadcloth, he declares, woven in Norwich, fit for a lord or a lady with taste. He runs the fabric through your fingers, thick, soft, and impossibly even. You ask the price. He names a sum that could feed a family for a month. When you raise an eyebrow, he leans closer. Aye, it's steep, but you're not just buying wool, you're buying reputation. He's not wrong. In Tudor England, trade is theater. The merchant's stall is his stage, the goods his costume. Wealth speaks through texture and tone, through the shimmer of satin, the shine of pewter, the weight of a ring. You don't just sell fabric here, you sell the illusion of permanence. Historians still argue whether Tudor England was truly capitalist or merely pretending to be. The guilds held tight control, the crown demanded taxes, and yet, beneath the surface, something new was stirring. A restlessness, the sense that one might climb not by birth but by bargain. As you wander deeper into the market, you catch sight of an apothecary's stall. Bottles of every color line the shelves, crimson tinctures, golden syrups, powders the color of dusk. The apothecary himself is small and round, his spectacles fogged from the steam rising off a kettle. For a weary traveler, he asks, squinting at you, something for the blood, the nerves. You hesitate, then point to a bottle of deep green liquid. What's that one for? He smiles slyly. For hope. You laugh, and does it work? Sometimes, he says, depends how much you want to believe. You leave him with that thought, pocketing a tiny pouch of lavender as you go. The market continues to churn around you, blacksmiths hammering, fishmongers shouting, beggars calling blessings on anyone with a coin to spare. You pause by a group of apprentices, their hands inked with charcoal, arguing about the price of iron. One of them swears that Spain is hoarding the best ore. Another insists that England's mines will soon outshine them all. They say there's gold in Wales, one whispers. There's gossip in every tavern, another replies. Same thing mostly. They all laugh, the sound mingling with the clatter of hooves and the creak of carts. You realize that this, not the grand halls or abbeys, is the heartbeat of the age, the chatter of trade, the hum of ambition. As the day wears on, the market thins. Rain begins again, soft but insistent, and stalls fold like closing books. You follow a cart uphill toward the wool hall, a vast, timbered structure where the real business happens. Inside, it's all murmurs and ledgers, the shuffle of coin and parchment. A merchant in fur-trimmed robes leans over a table. The price of dye's up again, he mutters to his partner. Spain controls the indigo routes now. Damn their ships. You remember the dyer from earlier. his blue-stained hands. Somewhere between his stall and this ledger, color has become currency. A clerk at the far end dips a quill and glances up at you. "Buying or selling?" he asks. "Watching," you answer. He nods knowingly. "Best way to learn." He's right. You stand and watch as fortunes rise and fall in ink. Wool is weighed, signed, sealed. Men shake hands like priests exchanging blessings. And just as you start to think it's all business, one merchant mutters a small prayer under his breath before closing a deal. Old habits die slowly in a world where God still audits the books. When you leave the hall, dusk has settled. Lanterns flicker in the doorways, painting halos on the rain-slick stone. The city exhales a long, smoky sigh. You walk toward the river, drawn by the scent of pitch and salt. At the docks, the world grows bigger. Ships creak like restless animals, their masts stabbing the fog. Men load crates by torchlight, cloth, tin, hides, barrels of ale. A sailor shouts orders in a mix of English, Dutch, and something else you can't quite place. A boy offers to sell you roasted eels on a stick. You take one, still steaming. "Where's this ship bound?" you ask, nodding toward a vessel painted with faded angels. "Antwerp," the boy says proudly. "They say they've got spices there, and silk so fine you could pull it through a ring." He grins. "I'll go someday. Someday soon. Soon as I've got shoes." You hand him a coin. He bows, pocketing it like treasure. Behind him, sailors chant as they haul rope. The rhythm is hypnotic, part prayer, part song, part survival. You feel the pull of the tide, the call of possibility. The river itself seems to murmur. Everything moves. Historians still argue whether Tudor England was an island or an empire in the making. You can feel both truths in the wind. The pride of isolation, the hunger of expansion. Somewhere out there, across dark waters, lies profit and danger enough to rewrite the map. As night deepens, you wander along the docks, passing taverns that spill laughter and music into the street. Inside one, a fiddler plays a tune so lively even the drunkest sailors try to dance. A woman in a green gown sits by the fire, counting coins with delicate fingers. You think she might be a merchant too, or maybe just wiser than most who deal with them. She looks up, meeting your eyes. "You look like someone who's lost something," she says softly. "Maybe," you reply, "or just learning what everything costs." She smiles faintly. "That's the same thing." You sit together for a while, sharing silence. The fire pops and the smell of salt mixes with ale. Somewhere outside, a ship's bell rings twice, departure or arrival, you can't tell. "When you finally rise to leave," she says, "be careful on the river road. It's easy to forget which way the current's pulling." You nod and step out into the mist, her words following you like an echo. The streets are nearly empty now. The market is asleep, the stalls folded, the merchants gone. Only the rain and the river keep working, patient, tireless, eternal. You pause on the bridge, watching reflections shiver across the black water. Each ripple catches a fragment of lantern light, gold, red, blue, all colors born of trade, of risk, of restless desire. And you think of that indigo-handed dyer, the merchant with his ledger, the boy dreaming of Antwerp. Each one chasing something just beyond reach, their lives woven into the fabric of a world that's never still. The rain softens. The air smells of wet wood and promise. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls the hour, slow, steady, forgiving. You pull your cloak tight and walk on, the cobbles gleaming beneath your feet like coins, each one carrying you deeper into the story that never stops selling itself. The next morning is quiet, too quiet, the kind that follows celebration or storm. You wake beneath a low timbered ceiling, light seeping through the cracks in the shutters, and for a moment you forget what century you're in. The scent of wood smoke and damp wool grounds you. Still Tudor, still England, still wrapped in the slow hum of a world half built by hand. Outside, the air feels heavy, as though the town itself is thinking. The roads are muddy from last night's rain, and a group of children hop from stone to stone, shrieking whenever they slip. You pass them and head toward the square, drawn by the sound of bells. A crowd has gathered near the church, not for worship, for news. A herald stands on a wooden platform, his crimson tabard damp with drizzle, a roll of parchment in his hand. "By order of the king," he begins, his voice carrying through the gray air. Everyone leans in. These proclamations are the Tudor version of morning headlines, a mix of law, gossip, and subtle threats. You catch fragments: taxes on imported wine, new punishments for vagabonds, an announcement about road repairs. The crowd murmurs approval and disapproval in equal measure. You step back, noticing how carefully everyone listens. For a world without printing presses in every home, the spoken word still rules. A careless sentence can ruin you, a clever one can raise you. As the crowd disperses, an old man chuckles beside you. "Same words, new parchment," he says. "They fix the roads every year. The holes fix themselves first." You laugh softly. The man tips his hat and shuffles away, leaving you to watch the church bell sway in its tower. If trade was the body of Tudor life, then communication, the spoken, the sung, the performed, was its pulse. Everywhere you turn, someone's talking, preaching, or performing. Words are currency here too, only harder to count. You wander down a narrow alley where the sound of music leaks from a doorway. Inside, a group of traveling players rehearse a scene. Their stage is nothing more than planks and paint, but their energy fills the room. A young actor in a frayed doublet throws himself to the floor, wailing dramatically, "My love is lost, my fortune too." A woman offstage rolls her eyes. "Your fortune was 3 pence, Thomas." "3 pence and my dignity," he corrects her to laughter. The troop's leader spots you and gestures for you to sit. "We perform tonight," he says proudly. "A new comedy, The Goose and the Bishop. Ever seen a bishop chase a goose for a miracle?" You admit you haven't. "Good," he grins. "Neither have we, makes it funnier that way." You realize that theater here is both escape and mirror, a place where people can laugh at the world without being punished for it. Yet even laughter has rules. Every joke carries the risk of offense, every satire a shadow of censorship. Historians still argue whether Tudor audiences came for truth or just noise. Judging by the rehearsal, it's probably both. Later that day, you wander toward a different kind of storytelling. In a small shop off the high street, the smell of ink and parchment hits you, sharp, chemical, alive. Inside, a printing press clanks like a heartbeat. Sheets of fresh paper hang to dry like laundry. The printer, a man with ink-blackened fingers, doesn't look up as you enter. "Careful where you step," he mutters. "That page cost me a prayer and half my sanity." You glance at the page in question. It's a pamphlet, a sermon, by the looks of it, arguing over whether salvation can be bought or only begged. "Dangerous stuff," you say lightly. He finally looks up, eyes gleaming. "The best kind." The press itself fascinates you, wooden, clunky, yet world-changing. Each crank of the handle births another page, another thought set loose into the world. Historians still argue whether print made the Reformation or just sped it up, the printer says, catching your gaze. Either way, it made people noisy. He hands you a page still wet with ink. The letters shimmer faintly in the lamplight as if breathing. You imagine them spreading from hand to hand, from mouth to mouth, reshaping belief, authority, truth. You thank him and step back into the street, where voices already carry fragments of debate. The Tudor world is changing, you realize. It no longer belongs only to those who can build or sow or fight. It belongs, increasingly, to those who can speak. That evening, you find yourself drawn by music again, this time louder, wilder. The town square has transformed into a festival ground. Bonfires crackle, ribbons flutter, and someone's roasting meat over a pit that glows like sunrise. "May Day," someone shouts, or something close enough. You're swept into the crowd, the rhythm infectious. Drummers pound out a beat that feels older than the church bells, older than England itself. Dancers circle the maypole, their ribbons tangling and untangling like lives entwined. You laugh as a man in a horned mask offers you cider. To the old ways, he toasts, and to new excuses for the same ones. You drink, the warmth spreading through you. The night blurs into motion, dancers, firelight, laughter, the smell of earth and ale. For a moment, class, faith, and order dissolve. Everyone becomes just a body moving to the same rhythm. Historians still argue, says a voice beside you, a scholar, maybe, or a drunk, whether these festivals were harmless fun or rebellion in disguise. You smile, too tired to care, maybe both. But not everyone celebrates. As the night deepens, the shadows grow longer. You notice figures slipping through alleys, not revelers but watchers. The crown has ears everywhere now, listening for sedition in song, blasphemy in laughter. In a nearby tavern, two men whisper over their mugs. One glances up and catches your eye. Careful, he warns softly. Words travel faster than legs these days. Outside, the festival winds down. The fires burn lower, leaving behind ash and music still humming in the air. You walk through the quiet streets, your footsteps muffled by straw and sleep. From a nearby window, a woman hums a lullaby, the same tune you heard by the maypole, now slowed to something tender, private. You pause, letting the melody carry you for a while. Tudor England, for all its noise and splendor, ends each day like this, in the hush between prayers and dreams. The fires fade, the laughter drifts away, and the world exhales. You climb the narrow stairs to your rented room, brushing soot from your sleeves. The air inside smells faintly of lavender and wax. On the table, the printer's pamphlet lies beside your cup, the ink dry now, the words waiting. You think of the herald's voice that morning, the actor's laughter, the printer's ink, the scholar's question. Every one of them part of a conversation that never ends. You blow out the candle, and for a heartbeat, the dark feels absolute, like the world holding its breath. Then, from somewhere outside, a bell tolls midnight, soft and deliberate. It sounds less like time passing and more like memory whispering. Everything spoken, written, built, or danced still echoes somewhere, even here, even now. You turn toward the sound, eyes half closed, and let it pull you into sleep, the last sound of the Tudor night ringing in your bones. Morning again. The air feels crisp, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster yells at the sun like it personally owes him money. You stretch beneath a linen blanket rough enough to exfoliate your soul and pull on yesterday's clothes, still smelling faintly of smoke and cider from the festival. Outside, the town stirs, carts creaking, dogs barking, doors thudding open. Life, as usual, has resumed its steady Tudor rhythm. You wander toward the market square. It's never the same twice. Stalls shift, people change, smells collide. One moment it's roasted chestnuts, the next it's salted fish, leather, onions, wet wool. The market is a heartbeat that refuses to stay regular. You stop by a stall draped with embroidered cloth. The kind noblewomen drape across their tables to show they have more money than sense. The merchant, a sharp-eyed woman with ink stains on her fingers, catches your curiosity. French thread, she says proudly, costs a fortune, worth it. You run your fingers across the pattern. The thread glitters faintly, catching the weak morning light. Who buys this? The ones who like to be noticed, she answers. The ones who can afford to pretend they don't care. There's truth in that. In Tudor England, every stitch is a statement. Even the choice between silk or wool says more about your soul than your diary ever could. The woman lowers her voice conspiratorially. Careful who you outshine. Last month a merchant's wife wore scarlet at the wrong feast. You'd think she declared war on the queen. You raise an eyebrow. What happened? She declared she didn't care, the woman says. The queen didn't believe her. She laughs, but there's an edge to it. You hand over a coin for a length of plain linen and move on. Further along, you spot an apprentice hauling a roll of dyed cloth so large it could double as a sail. His master, standing nearby, barks orders about keeping it clean. "No mud, boy, that's imported from Florence, costs more than your education." The boy mutters something under his breath. You catch only, "Not worth the sweat," but the master hears enough to glare daggers. It's hard not to smile. You've seen this pattern before, power expressed through fabric, obedience sewn into every seam. The colors of Tudor life aren't just pretty, they're political. The afternoon sun climbs higher, warming the rooftops and turning puddles into mirrors. You follow a stream of people heading toward the Guildhall, a grand wooden structure with carved angels on its beams. Inside, it's cooler, darker, the air thick with beeswax and ambition. Guilds rule everything here: tailors, dyers, masons, even candle makers. You slip into a meeting already in progress. A dozen men argue over pricing and quality, each voice rising like a church bell trying to drown out the others. "Too many cheats," one cries, "selling inferior cloth." "Your cloth so stiff," another fires back, "it could walk itself to London." The room bursts into laughter, tension breaking like cheap thread. Then someone mentions taxes, and the laughter dies instantly. Historians still argue whether these guilds protected the common worker or just reinforced hierarchy. But sitting here, listening to the mix of pride and paranoia, you suspect it's both. Protection often feels a lot like control. When the meeting ends, the air outside tastes fresher. You walk toward the river, watching barges drift lazily downstream. The water carries the town's secrets: dye from workshops, scraps from kitchens, gossip from the washing lines. A washerwoman kneels at the bank, beating a tunic against a rock like it insulted her. She glances up at you. "You ever tried getting mud out of velvet?" You admit you haven't. "Good," she says, "don't start." You laugh, but her hands don't stop moving. Her life, like the river, is constant motion, scrubbing, wringing, rinsing, repeating. The elegance of Tudor clothing depends entirely on people like her staying invisible. The sun dips lower, and the river glows gold. You sit on a wooden post, watching a barge loaded with barrels drift toward London. Somewhere inside those barrels is dye, indigo matter, woad, color-bound for a noble's robe or a queen's gown. You imagine how many lives those colors pass through. The dyer's stained hands, the spinner's raw fingertips, the merchant's calculations. The lady's sigh as she chooses a shade that flatters her rank. A whole economy woven from vanity and survival. Later, back in the market, a group of townsfolk gather around a juggler. He tosses apples into the air, catching them behind his back to delighted cheers. You join the laughter, half hypnotized by the rhythm. But the act ends abruptly when one apple splats into the mud. The crowd groans, coins stop flying, and the juggler bows with exaggerated solemnity. "Perfection," he says, wiping his hands, "is a myth for the rich. The rest of us have gravity." It's funny, but it lingers, maybe because it's true. Evening falls slow and orange. The stalls pack up, the square empties. You make your way toward the outskirts where cottages crouch low against the wind. A woman sits outside one, spinning wool, her foot rocking the wheel like a lullaby. She doesn't look up as you pass, but says softly, "If thread breaks, don't curse it, just start again." It feels like advice for more than sewing. You keep walking until the noise of the town fades into crickets and the soft hiss of the river. In the distance, you can see the manor house glowing faintly through the trees, candles behind leaded glass, shadows moving across velvet curtains. You know, without needing to see, that inside those rooms people are dressing for supper, fussing over lace and cuffs, comparing rings, whispering about who sat closest to whom at court. And somewhere in the same town, a washerwoman's hands ache from wringing their fine linen. The lace of time, you think, threads all of them together, rich and poor, seen and unseen, the pattern invisible until you step far enough back to notice. You sit for a while on a wooden fence, listening to the wind move through the reeds. The world smells of wool, damp soil, and something faintly metallic, the smell of work, of history still unfinished. You tilt your head to the sky, where the moon rises pale and deliberate, and wonder whether centuries from now, anyone will remember the hands that spun, sewed, and dyed the colors of a kingdom. The answer, you suspect, is yes, because even forgotten, their work still clings to the world like scent on fabric. You head back toward the faint glow of the town, steps soft, thoughts quieter. The night has begun its slow unraveling again, each sound a stitch in the vast cloth of Tudor life. You wake to rain, not a gentle mist, but that steady, soaking kind that turns roads into chocolate pudding and roofs into drums. The sound fills the room before your eyes even open, rhythmic, endless, like 1,000 small fingers tapping on the world. You roll over beneath your coarse blanket, half tempted to let the storm sing you back to sleep. But the smell of smoke and wet timber calls you outside. You pull on your cloak and step into the street. Mud splashes up your boots instantly. The town, usually so alive, now moves slower, muffled under the downpour. Women hunch beneath shawls, children race for cover, and merchants curse the heavens as they drag tarps over their stalls. The rain, though inconvenient, is also life. It fills cisterns, softens wool, cools brick kilns, and washes away the stink of too many people living too close. You breathe it in, letting the damp air coat your lungs. A blacksmith's hammer still rings somewhere nearby, proof that not everyone can afford rest. You follow the sound until you find the forge, glowing like a furnace of gods. Inside, the air is thick and hot, an entirely different world from the chill outside. The blacksmith nods at you without pausing his work. He's a mountain of a man, arms slick with sweat, face streaked with soot. "Weather's good for business," he says over the clang. "Tools break faster when wet." He shapes a piece of glowing iron with slow, practiced movements, sparks flying like tiny stars. "You want to understand England," he adds. "Forget the court. Watch the forges. We build kings the same way we build nails: heat, strike, cool, repeat." You grin, and if the iron bends. He shrugs, then it learns. You leave him to his rhythm, stepping back into the rain. The smell of metal clings to your clothes. Down the road, a group of laborers push carts full of bricks toward the edge of town. You follow, curious, until you see the outline of new houses rising through the mist, the beginning of a new street. Builders call out to one another, voices half drowned by rain, hands caked in clay. The ground squelches beneath every step. You watch as a mason sets the first stone of what will become a doorway. He presses it into place with care, his fingers trembling slightly from the cold. Beside him, an apprentice wipes rain from his face and mutters, "By the time we finish, this'll all fall down again." The mason chuckles. "That's the point, keeps us in work." It's true, Tudor towns are in constant motion, walls patched, roofs replaced, streets widened, bridges rebuilt. Progress here doesn't mean perfection, it means persistence. Historians still argue whether this endless rebuilding was a sign of decay or resilience. Maybe both. The Tudors, after all, lived in a world both rising and crumbling at once. You duck into a nearby church for shelter. Inside, it smells of candle wax and wet wool. The air hums faintly with prayer, not words, exactly, but the soft rhythm of devotion. A few parishioners kneel before the altar, their shadows flickering on the stone walls. One woman glances up at you. Her eyes are sharp, curious. "You're not from here," she says quietly. "Passing through," you answer. She nods. "Everyone is, even those who think they are." You sit beside her. Rain streaks down the stained glass, making the colors swim and shimmer. The saints look almost alive in the shifting light. She crosses herself and whispers, "The world feels heavy today." You nod. "Maybe it's the weather." Or maybe it's just the times, she murmurs. They say the monasteries will fall next. They say change is coming again. Her voice trembles slightly, fear or hope, you can't tell. Change in Tudor England always arrives wearing both faces. When you leave the church, the rain has softened to drizzle. The air smells cleaner, fresher. You follow the path toward the river again, where the water runs high and brown from the storm. A barge passes slowly, its pilot hunched under an oilskin cloak, whistling a tune you half recognize, something about fortune and folly. You pause on the bridge, leaning against the wet stone, watching ripples distort your reflection. The town's spires shimmer behind you, blurred by rain. You can almost imagine the centuries folding in on themselves, the same river carrying different lives downstream: builders, smiths, merchants, lovers, ghosts. You step away from the bridge and follow the road out toward the countryside. The fields beyond are green and sodden, sheep huddled in clumps, farmers trudging through muck with resigned patience. The smell of manure and wet grass hits you like a wall. A shepherd waves as you pass. Careful where you walk, that mud's deeper than your manners. You grin, stepping carefully. Does it ever dry? Once a year, he calls back. Then it rains again to make sure we don't forget who's boss. The rhythm of rural life feels different here, slower, steadier, bound to the earth in a way the towns aren't. The cottages are smaller, the roofs lower, but the air feels freer. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, and somewhere a dog barks at nothing in particular. You stop by a hedge where a woman gathers herbs into a basket. Her hands move quickly, practiced. For the apothecary, she says without looking up. Rain makes the leaves sweeter. What are they for, you ask? Love mostly, she answers, then she smiles, or pretending it's love. Her laugh is low, knowing. You thank her and move on. As dusk creeps in, the clouds break and a pale stripe of sunlight cuts across the fields. The wet grass sparkles, and for a moment the world looks gilded. You find a low stone wall and sit, watching the last of the rain drift east. It's quiet here, the kind of quiet that feels earned. You close your eyes and let the wind brush your face. Somewhere behind you, the town still hums, forges, bells, voices, but out here, the land speaks in softer tones. Water trickling, leaves trembling, sheep bleating like tired children. You think of the blacksmith's words again. Heat, strike, cool, repeat. It's the rhythm of everything, the building, the breaking, the beginning again. The light fades, slow and amber. Smoke from distant chimneys curls upward, meeting the first stars. You rise, stretch, and start back toward the town, your boots squelching with every step. Behind you, the countryside exhales. Ahead, lamps flicker to life, one by one, like a constellation returning to the earth. The rain has stopped, but the sound of it lingers in your mind, the steady, endless music of survival. The morning air smells faintly of bread and smoke, the twin sense of survival. You wander toward the bakery first, because let's be honest, the smell of warm loaves could raise the dead. The baker, a sturdy man with forearms like breadboards, is already covered in flour from head to toe. Best time of day, he grins, pulling a loaf from the oven. Before anyone's awake enough to complain. The bread crackles as he sets it on the counter, steam rising like a ghost escaping. You buy one, it's still too hot to touch, but you don't care and step outside. The crust burns your fingers slightly, but it's worth it. The street around you hums to life. Children chase stray dogs, a milkmaid calls out her route, and a man with a bucket of eels yells that his are the freshest in town. You politely decline to test that claim. Everything feels a little damp still from yesterday's rain, but the world is bright again, scrubbed clean. As you chew your bread, you notice a group of workmen gathered by a timber frame on the edge of the square. A new shop is going up, its skeletal beams angled against the sky like ribs. The men work in rhythm, lifting, hammering, shouting instructions. You pause to watch them. One man, clearly the foreman, gestures toward a crooked beam and bellows. If that roof caves in, it'll be your skull next." The others laugh, but not too loudly. You can tell they respect him, even when he threatens them with casual violence. It's a Tudor thing, authority always comes with a hint of menace. The building takes shape as you watch. Pegs hammered, joints tightened, sawdust rising like smoke. It's oddly hypnotic, this slow birth of structure. The smell of oak and pitch fills the air. A young carpenter wipes sweat from his brow and notices you watching. "Not much to see yet," he says. "Give it a week and it'll be something." "What will it be?" you ask. "A clothier's shop, silk, lace, the fancy stuff," he shrugs. "We build the walls, others fill them with gold." You smile, seems fair. "Is it?" he asks, but before you can answer, he's called back to the work. You wander off, the rhythm of hammers echoing behind you. The street narrows, the houses leaning inward like gossiping old friends. A painter is working on a signboard, a golden spool on a blue background. His brush strokes are delicate, precise, but his expression is somewhere between boredom and concentration. "Hard job?" you ask. "Not hard," he replies, "just slow. Paints like a nobleman, it does what it wants when it wants." You laugh and he nods toward the sky. "If it rains again, I'm ruined. Been 3 weeks on this sign already. They say patience is a virtue. I say it's an illness." You keep walking, passing under a half-finished archway. The smell of wet stone greets you, mingled with the faint metallic tang of tools. Inside, masons work in near silence. Their movements are small, deliberate, each strike of the chisel measured like breath. One pauses, steps back, and eyes his work critically. "Too deep," he mutters. "Stone's like time, you can't put it back once it's gone." Historians still argue whether Tudor architecture was about beauty or power. Standing here, surrounded by scaffolding and sweat, you think it's both, but maybe more about endurance. Every beam, every carving, every arch seems to say the same thing: we were here and we mattered. By afternoon, the town feels alive again. The rain has been forgiven, the mud mostly conquered. You cross the bridge and follow the road toward the outskirts, where the houses give way to open land and the air smells of grass and wood smoke. A manor rises ahead, tall and symmetrical, its red brick glistening in the sun. You pause at the gate, half expecting to be chased away, but the gatekeeper nods. "They're showing visitors the gardens today," he says, "as long as you don't touch the peacocks." You promise you won't. Inside, the gardens stretch in geometric perfection, hedges trimmed like green puzzles, gravel paths raked into patterns, fountains tossing silver arcs of water into the air. It's beautiful, but a little too controlled, like nature under contract. A gardener with mud to his elbows kneels beside a rose bush. "Not bad, is it?" he says proudly. "Took 3 years to grow these hedges right." "They look perfect," you say. He grins. "That's the trick, make it look easy, so they think it's art, not work." A peacock struts nearby, iridescent and insufferable. You wonder if it knows it's part of the show. Beyond the garden lies the manor itself, all tall windows and carved stone, the smell of beeswax and perfume leaking through the open doors. You peek inside, where servants bustle about carrying trays, adjusting curtains, polishing silver until it gleams. In one corner, a young woman sits by the window, stitching lace into a collar. The thread glows pale in the sunlight, her fingers moving in a blur. She glances up and smiles politely before returning to her work. "Making lace?" you ask. "Yes," she says softly. "For Lady Pembroke, she likes her neck to look expensive." Her tone carries neither envy nor sarcasm, just weary fact. You watch her hands for a moment, quick, precise, nearly invisible. Each loop and twist of thread is a sentence in a language only a few ever learn. "Do you ever keep any for yourself?" you ask. She smiles faintly. "Once, but my mother sold it before I could wear it, said we needed bread more than beauty." She ties off the thread, snips it clean and sets the collar aside. Bread lasts longer, she adds, almost to herself. You leave her there, surrounded by quiet industry. The room smells of lavender and patience. Outside again, the sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the hedges. The peacock has vanished, probably plotting vengeance against anyone who ignored it. You walk slowly down the gravel path, shoes crunching softly. At the gate the gardener waves. Careful on your way back, the road's slick with clay. Always is, you reply. The town appears ahead, glowing in the low-light, chimneys smoking, bells ringing faintly. For a moment, you feel like part of something vast yet intimate, a world stitched together by hands, hope, and habit. You reach the bridge again just as the first stars appear, their reflections trembling in the dark river. You lean against the stone rail, bread long gone, pockets lighter, heart heavier in the best way. The carpenters will keep building. The masons will keep carving. The lace makers will keep stitching their quiet rebellions. And centuries from now, someone might still walk these same roads, tracing the same echoes, feeling the same pull between survival and beauty. You push away from the rail, the river whispering below like a lullaby, and head toward the glow of the tavern. The night smells of smoke and sweet ale, the unofficial perfume of history. Inside, laughter spills like light through the cracks of time. The tavern is older than it looks, which is saying something, because it already looks like it might keel over in a strong wind. Its beams sag, its floor tilts, and its signboard, a faded boar with one tusk, creaks like a dying sailor each time the door swings open. But that's the charm of it in Tudor England. Nothing perfect can be trusted. The moment you step inside, the air hits you, a dense, warm fog of ale, sweat, wood smoke, and laughter. Someone's roasting meat on the hearth, probably rabbit, though you wouldn't swear to it. A fiddler in the corner saws at his instrument like it owes him money, and the rhythm sets the room thrumming. At one table, a group of sailors are arm wrestling with predictable noise. At another, two men argue over a dice throw that's probably been rigged since before the Reformation. The serving girl darts between them all, carrying tankards with supernatural precision. Her hair is coming loose, her apron stained, and her smile could win wars. You find a corner table, the wood scarred with centuries of initials and spilled beer. Before you can even sit properly, she's there. What'll it be, love? Something that won't kill me, you say. She smirks, that'll cost extra. You end up with a tankard of ale that tastes like smoke and autumn. It's stronger than it looks. As you sip, the room hums around you, a kind of low, living heartbeat. Someone starts singing, off-key but enthusiastic, and soon half the room joins in. The song, about a miller, a maiden, and a goose that ends badly for everyone involved. It's ridiculous, but you can't help smiling. This, you realize, is what warmth feels like in a world without central heating. Not just fire, but people pressed close, sharing noise and breath and stories. At the next table, an old man in a threadbare coat catches your eye. "You're new," he says, leaning over. His voice is like gravel soaked in whiskey. "Just passing through," you reply. He nods sagely, as though that explains everything. "Then you'll want to hear the gossip." Before you can object, he begins, a torrent of tales about the town. Who's sleeping with whose wife, who cheated the guild, whose cow has the devil's mark, and who swears the baker waters down his ale, which you quietly suspect might be true. You try to keep up, but his stories twist and double back on themselves until you're lost in them, like wandering a hedge maze of scandal. Somewhere between the tale of the haunted tailor and the cursed pig, you stop trying to separate truth from performance. It doesn't matter. Gossip here is an art form, half-truths embroidered with the care of lace. When he pauses for breath, you ask, "What about you? What's your story?" He laughs, a deep, surprising sound. "Me? I'm no story. I'm the listener. Been sitting in this same corner 20 years collecting what other people forget." He taps his temple. "One day I'll tell them all back and the town won't know what hit it." He winks, drains his mug, and leans back into shadow. You can't tell if he's joking. The fiddler starts another tune, faster this time, and a few brave souls take to the floor. It's not graceful, but it's joyous. Boots thud, skirts whirl, and someone nearly collides with the table. The serving girl scolds them, laughing all the while. "Go on," says the old man beside you. "You look like you could dance." You shake your head. "Not unless you want broken furniture." He grins. "That's half the fun." The music builds, wild and uneven, and for a moment it feels like the whole tavern is alive. The walls breathing, the floor pulsing, the air trembling with the sheer, impossible fact of existence. Outside, the world might be mud and frost and taxes, but in here, it's nothing but rhythm and laughter. Then just as suddenly the music stops. The fiddler lowers his bow, eyes fixed on the doorway. You turn. A man has entered, tall, pale, wrapped in a cloak too fine for this place. The room hushes like it's forgotten how to breathe. Even the fire seems to shrink a little. He surveys the tavern slowly, eyes sharp as coins. Is there a man named Turner here? No one answers. A few people glance toward the corner, where one of the sailors shifts uncomfortably. I'm Turner, the sailor says, finally standing. His bravado is cracked at the edges. The stranger steps forward. Then you know what this is about. The air thickens. You can feel the whole room holding itself still. Turner shakes his head once sharply. Not here. But the man in the cloak only smiles, a small, cold thing. Here will do. The flash of steel is almost polite. The sound it makes less so. Someone screams, the fiddler drops his bow, and the serving girl's tray clatters to the floor. When it's over, the stranger wipes his blade on Turner's sleeve, sheathes it, and tosses a coin onto the table. For the trouble, he says, and walks out into the night. For a moment, no one moves. Then, as if on cue, life returns slowly, awkwardly. The fiddler picks up his bow with trembling hands. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else reaches for another drink. You stare at the door. The cold from outside seeps in, curling around your ankles. The old man beside you exhales. Well, he says finally, that's one story I won't have to invent. You don't stay long after that. The ale has gone bitter, the air too heavy. When you step outside, the night is crisp, clear, and full of stars. Somewhere down the road, a horse's hooves echo softly. You walk toward the bridge again, the sound of the river louder now, the tavern's warmth fading behind you. It strikes you then how fragile it all is. The laughter, the songs, the walls, the people. Every moment feels borrowed, balanced on the edge of frost and fire. You stop halfway across the bridge and look down at the water. It moves slow, dark, patient, as though it's seen everything and learned not to care. Somewhere in the town behind you, someone starts singing again, quieter this time. A new verse, a new story. You smile, pull your cloak tighter, and keep walking into the night. The morning comes not as a burst of light, but as a slow unfurling. Mist first, then the thin gold of dawn spilling between the crooked rooftops. The cobblestones beneath your boots are slick with dew, and every sound, cartwheel, hoofstep, rooster, seems softened by the hour. You walk through the waking town, past shuttered stalls and the scent of baking bread, until the chill of the night is just a whisper behind you. The market square is already stirring. A boy calls out the price of onions in a voice still breaking. A woman in a rough cloak haggles over a bolt of cloth dyed such a vivid blue you almost squint to look at it. You watch the exchange. She fingers the fabric, murmurs something about her daughter's wedding, and the merchant, after much sighing, drops his price. Deal sealed, she tucks the cloth to her chest as though it's a treasure. You realize that, in Tudor life, it is. Fabric isn't just fabric. It's a promise of warmth, of status, of dignity. You think of the weavers in their cottages, the dye vats steaming with woad and madder, the carders' aching hands. Each thread in that bolt of cloth has passed through lives, through labor invisible to those who will wear it. As you move through the crowd, you catch sight of someone familiar, The old man from the tavern, perched beside a stall, nursing a cup of something hot. He spots you, raises his cup in greeting. "Didn't expect to see you after last night," he says. You grin faintly. "Didn't expect to be seen." He chuckles. "Few do, but morning has a way of showing what night hides." You both watch as a group of apprentices carry bundles of cloth toward the guild hall. Their chatter is light, their tunics plain, but one has a scrap of bright ribbon tied at his sleeve, a tiny rebellion of color in a world that still guards its hierarchy by shade. "Historians still argue," the old man muses, "whether color kept order or merely disguised its cracks. I think people wore what they could when they could, because it reminded them they were alive." You glance at the ribbon again. "Maybe that's why it matters so much. It's a kind of hope." He nods slowly. "A dangerous kind, but still hope." The church bell tolls the hour, heavy and solemn, scattering pigeons into the pale sky. You follow their rise, the flapping wings momentarily blotting out the sun. Then, like a memory stirring, you remember everything you've seen since you arrived. The spinning rooms with their hum of effort, the noblewoman measuring silk by candlelight, the laws that dictated who could shine and who must fade. The world of Tudor cloth wasn't just stitched with beauty, it was woven through with control. Every color a symbol, every thread a rule. And yet, people found ways around it. A servant saving a year's wages for a crimson ribbon. A merchant's wife secretly trimming her sleeves in forbidden velvet. A queen herself, flaunting the very laws she proclaimed, just to remind everyone she could. That's the paradox that hums beneath it all. Clothing as obedience and defiance, humility and pride, survival and art. You wander toward the edge of the square, where the house is thin and the fields begin. The morning light touches everything now, rooftops, puddles, faces, with the same indifferent gold. You pause to watch a washerwoman beating linen against the stones of the riverbank. The rhythm of it feels ancient, eternal, like the pulse of time itself. For a moment the centuries blur. The Tudor morning becomes just morning. The sounds, the splash of water, the cry of birds, the rustle of cloth could belong to any era. And that's when you feel it. The quiet realization that history isn't something that happened. It's something that still breathes, folded into the air you inhale, stitched into the fabric on your back. The lace of time, intricate and endless, binding past to present with threads you can't see but always feel. You look down at your own sleeve, at the weave of your shirt. Modern, yes, but not untouched by the same lineage. Somewhere, deep in the cotton and dye, the ghosts of Tudor fingers still linger. The same hunger for expression, for beauty, for belonging. The wind picks up, carrying the faint scent of bread and wet earth. You close your eyes, letting it move through you. And then the world softens. The sounds drift apart. The edges of thought begin to loosen. Your steps slow, your breath evens. The old man's voice echoes faintly in your mind. Morning has a way of showing what night hides. But now it's night again, your night. You picture the candlelight of a Tudor chamber flickering against a wall of tapestries, the hum of distant voices, the faint rustle of a gown. You imagine yourself there, sitting by the hearth, wrapped in wool and time. And as the images fade, as the centuries slip back into silence, you feel the weight of history ease, like fabric settling into stillness after a long day's wear. The lace of time has held you close, threaded you through stories of silk and soot, color and class, and now it lets you rest. The world narrows to quiet breath, a soft heartbeat, a slow exhale. The fire dims, the hum of the past fades. You are safe, you are warm, you are home. Sleep now, gently, deeply, as the centuries fold over you like a well-worn cloak. Sweet dreams.